Hello and welcome to this weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Greek, and today we're going to look at 2 Corinthians 13:12. Let's begin by reading the Greek. Aspasaste allelus in hagio philemati. Aspadzantai humas hoi hagioi pantes. We'll do a translation. Greet one another with a holy kiss. All the saints, or all the holy people, greet you. You'll notice the NIV translation here adds the word here. All God's people here send their greetings, because it's unlikely that here in 2 Corinthians that Paul really intends to say all Christians who are alive then or all Christians throughout history are sending their greetings, but he means all the saints, that is, all of God's holy people there where he is writing from, send their greetings to the Corinthians. So I think that addition of the word here is warranted based on the context. Also notice how the NIV here wants to avoid misunderstanding, and it translates hoi hagioi. Very literally, that's the holy ones. The adjective hagios means holy. Here the substantive plural, nominative plural here, holy ones, it's the subject of the verb aspadzantai, the holy ones, or the saints, and it's modified by pantes, all the holy ones greet you. But we realize that there's a lot of baggage with the word saints, and even holy ones is somewhat confusing, so the NIV renders it all God's people. I want to say a little bit more about this aspasaste. The lexical form of that is aspadzamai, which means to greet. And if you look in Moulton and Milligan is a lexicon based upon the papyri. In this lexicon, they note that the word aspadzamai is frequently used in extra-biblical papyri, in letters, at the end of letters to give greetings, farewell greetings, and at the end of letters. And so we're not surprised to find this greeting in the New Testament at the end of many letters, often with a certain Christian twist to it. We also note it's interesting that this word is a middle preference verb, a verb that prefers the middle voice. And Neva Miller, in her wonderful little article at the end of the Freiburg Lexicon, Neva Miller notes how verbs that involve reciprocity frequently prefer the middle. And by reciprocity, she goes on to say, meaning that it involves two parties, and if one party were to be removed, the action could not take place or would be meaningless. And so when you greet someone, there has to be someone else there to greet. There has to be two parties. There's reciprocity. And so we're not surprised that verbs like this prefer the middle. Now, we look at this particular form here at the beginning of the verse, and we see there's a sigma and an alpha. This is, in fact, an aorist middle imperative. It's an aorist middle imperative, second person plural. It's interesting, right prior to this, we have numerous present imperatives, and then there's a shift here in verse 12 to an aorist imperative. But then when we have the verb aspadzamai here as a present middle third person plural as an indicative, it's in the present. So here we have an aorist form, and here we have a present form. We have all present imperatives above. What's going on here? Don't know if I can answer this question for you completely, but Moule, in his little idioms of the New Testament Greek intermediate grammar, he notes that in greetings, the word aspadzamai, if it's in the indicative, it prefers the present, but if there's an imperative form, it's found in the aorist. And so that's an interesting pattern. This conforms to that pattern that he notes. So we're not explaining why it is, but we can note that it conforms to a pattern recognized by the grammarian Moule. We'll just note as well this prepositional phrase here, in hagio philemati. This prepositional phrase is functioning to communicate means. Greet one another by what means? By what instrument? By a holy kiss. So Paul has in mind here early Christians greeting one another in a warm and culturally appropriate way. Now, if we think hermeneutically for a second and we say, well, how do people today apply this? I think we can definitely separate, if we read carefully the New Testament, Paul's intent in this, and then the cultural practice, which we're able to separate from his intent. And now this has to be done very carefully. People can engage in hermeneutics to excuse themselves from the text or to explain away the text. But I think here, you can judge this for yourself, be a Berean Christian, but I think we can say that a literal application of this passage in many cultures would actually not be in line with Paul's intent. In other words, in some cultures, Asian cultures, someone to kiss another Christian when they met them would be scandalous or awkward or misunderstood. It would not be a warm expression of greeting. So we're able to separate the intent here from the cultural practice of the intent. And that's why it's interesting if you look at Philip's translation or his paraphrase of the New Testament. He paraphrases this, I think, if I remember correctly, a hearty handshake all around. Now, I'm very much in favor of translating this literally with a holy kiss, but then recognizing that in the application of this in different cultures, there will be a culturally appropriate application of the warm greeting. And so in that paraphrase, Phillips, I guess, is giving us a British application of a warm and culturally appropriate greeting, a hearty handshake all around.